When I was a kid, I loved going to visit my grandparents. They were really into comics too, and they would always share their collections of comics with us kids. And my grandpa was into Far Side, and he had lots of different ones like that. And then my grandma had Calvin and Hobbes, which is my favorite today, and also Family Circle. And Family Circle is really interesting because a lot of times they would give a child's perspective on a difficult idea. And it would help the adults too to understand that from a better perspective. Heaven a lot of times was a topic that they dealt with because we all want to know what does happen to our loved ones when they pass away, when we lose someone that's close to us. How do we deal with that loss? I mean, even little kids need to know. And so the illustrator, he would help his audience to understand the concept of heaven from the perspective of a little child. I think he did a really good job of communicating these complex biblical ideas in that way. But he's writing a comic, so I mean, he fell back on these stereotypical comic-like depictions of heaven. I mean, the clouds, the blindingly white surround. I'm not talking about a blizzard here, we're talking about heaven. I mean, the cherubs, everything, harps, wings, etc. You get the idea. And on a human level, we've seen how hurtful these stereotypes can be, especially when they're advancing misconceptions about individuals and groups of people. We can get it all wrong. I mean, things that we haven't seen or that we haven't really understood, we start to build an image in our mind's eye with what we think we know, right? Things that we've heard. And we also work in a healthy dose of our own imagination. I mean, I was telling my son just this week, as human beings, we're really good at coming up with new ideas and creating fictions because we are created in God's image. And God is the creator. And so we've been told all sorts of things about what heaven will be like, and we have all sorts of ideas in our head. And we might be pretty excited about it. We might be, meh. But those ideas, they might be based on allegories in the Bible, prophecies in Revelation, Daniel and the like. Others might be from different traditions altogether. I mean, the cherub, for example, we tend to take more of a Roman look at that. The diminutive winged angel in a diaper, I mean, a cute little thing, right? But in Ezekiel 1:13, we're told that the cherubim looked like bright coals of fire or brilliant torches, and lightning seemed to flash back and forth among them. I mean, not talking about a horse of a different color here. This is an entirely different being from what many of us are thinking of. We've got the wrong idea about what heaven is going to be like. Think about that the next time that you call a well-behaved kid a cute little cherub. There's nothing cute or little about a cherub. Awe-inspiring, fearfully and wonderfully made, absolutely. I mean, you see, just like stereotyping people, stereotyping heaven can lead us to draw all the wrong conclusions. The difference is, it doesn't hurt or offend heaven. But the results for ourselves can be even more destructive. Because we aren't seeing things as they truly are. We're seeing our own imagination, our own fiction. So we might have this picture of what heaven might be like. But what is it really like? What do we do with these ideas that we do have? I mean, if we have this idea that heaven is all about cherubs and harps and clouds, we might say, oh yes, please. I don't think a lot of people are there, but maybe there's someone out there who thinks that heaven is going to be like this huge, larger-than-life precious moments display. Now, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but I'm pretty sure God can do better. A lot of people, though, say, I get that that's what heaven is, clouds and harps. I mean, that's not my thing. No, thanks. I think I can do better than that, is the other response that a lot of us get. We can imagine something better, so no thanks, God, we've got this covered. In The Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis describes hell as a place where you can finally have whatever you like to imagine, and in the absence of God, all that can do is create more and more misery. It's all rubbish, because you're missing the whole point of heaven. But Pastor, heaven's a long ways off. Does it really matter what I think about heaven now? And I want to tell you that yes, it does, because if you're missing the point about heaven, you're probably also missing the point about following Jesus in the first place. The big idea here is that we need to see Jesus as he is, not according to the stereotypes that we're holding on to in our mind. Go ahead and turn to Colossians chapter 1. We're going to read verses 25 through 28. God has given me the responsibility of serving his church by proclaiming his entire message to you. This message was kept secret for centuries and generations past, but now it has been revealed to God's people, for God wanted them to know that the riches and the glory of Christ are for you Gentiles too. And this is the secret. Christ lives in you. This gives you assurance of sharing his glory. So we tell others about Christ, wanting everyone, warning everyone, and teaching everyone with all the wisdom that God has given us. We want to present them to God perfect in their relationship to Christ. The glory of heaven is a beautiful thing. It is the glory that we get to share with Jesus as his co-heirs. In that glory, we get to share it also with other disciples. And it's this glory and that sharing that drives us to tell other people about the wonderful things that God has done for us through his Son, Jesus Christ. Paul is telling the Colossians that this glory was hidden for centuries, generations. People have been trying to guess at what that secret is, at what heaven's really going to be like. And Paul tells us right here, you don't have to wonder anymore. God has made the secret clear finally. And he's not talking about some extra biblical account here of someone's near-death experience. The secret, Paul says right there in verse 27, Christ lives in you. If you have chosen to follow Jesus, just like in Galatians 2:20, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Think back last week to Dan's message. The old man, that rotting spiritual flesh, that meat sack, has been cast aside. And we have a new life because Christ lives in us when we choose to follow him. Paul tells us that first off, this new life is the confirmation of our participation in eternal life with Jesus. And secondly, he's telling us that that new life is going to drive us to tell others about Jesus, to share this new common sense, this new wisdom that God has given to us. It was a secret, it was hidden, but now it's in the open. Shout it from the rooftops. Let's go ahead and dig deeper into understanding that new life that Jesus is now living in us when we decide to follow him. Go ahead and turn to 1 John. We're going to read in chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. See how very much our Father loves us, for he calls us his children, and that is what we are. But the people who belong to this world, they don't recognize that we are God's children because they don't know him. Dear friends, we're already God's children, but he has not yet shown us what we will be like when Christ appears. But we do know that we will be like him, for we will see him as he really is. And all who have this eager expectation will keep themselves pure, just as he is pure. This whole series, we've been coming back to this idea that God is not done with us yet. That's what it means to be a disciple, that God isn't done with us yet. And it's really exciting recognizing that God's still working on us. John says that God is already, even though we're not done yet, he's already willing to claim us as his children. And the world doesn't recognize that because they don't recognize God. We don't have that perfect picture yet either, though. John says we don't even know what we're going to look like when God is finished with us yet, when our discipleship is complete. But we do know that we will look like Jesus because we're being discipled. And remember, a disciple is someone who's studying their master's teachings and imitating the master's life. And the disciple's goal is to become like the master. And as Jesus lives in us, he is conforming us to his own image, helping us to achieve our goal of discipleship, to complete our discipleship when we're with him in glory finally. And so when our discipleship is complete, we're going to be able to truly see Jesus as he is. And seeing him as he is, then we can also be like him. Just like the mystery that Paul tells us about in Colossians, the mystery of what we will be like can also spur us on to share with others. That mystery of our final form as disciples and the end of our discipleship process. It should also, though, inspire us, spur us on to eagerly anticipate Jesus. Now, you might not understand everything about Jesus now. I don't. But let's practice now with a little bit of Jesus that we can see. I mean, we've got God's Word, we've got Jesus living in us. We can understand some of what Jesus is. So going back to last week's message from Dan, and if you hadn't had a chance, I want to encourage you to check out Dan's video. We need to turn away from those indwelling sins, those lifestyle sins. As disciples, we keep ourselves pure just as Jesus is pure. And more, we see him clearly. And we understand what heaven will be like, what that glory will be like, not because we've read the brochure, but because we've seen it. We've actually experienced what heaven is going to be like in the person of Jesus Christ. We are beginning as disciples to see him as he is. When our discipleship is complete, we will see him as he is. And that's the point, the anticipation of heaven. I mean, I could get up here and I could preach hellfire and brimstone. And it's true that God is a just God. And it might do you some good to consider that truth. But don't dwell there. Don't live there. I could get up here and I could preach to you about all the duties, obligations, all the responsibilities that we have in this world. And that might do you some good too. I mean, it's true. But we know that this world, it can never last. So today I'm telling you about the plan, the final destination that God desires for each of us to choose by following his Son. Focus on that and on seeing Jesus as he is, glorified by the Father. And allow Jesus to transform you here and now for the future. Don't get caught up in a place that you'd never want to visit, or in the details of a world that we know is tragically temporary. Focus instead on eternity, right now, and see Jesus as he is, and allow his reality to transform you. So I want to thank you for joining us again today. I want to encourage you to connect with your small groups, dig into these questions, and really anticipate, what is it going to be like when we're there with Jesus? We can know that truth because we can begin to know Jesus here and now. If you're not a part of a grace group, I want to encourage you to reach out via email. I'd be glad to discuss the questions that are available on our e-bulletin. I'd also be more than happy to connect you with a grace group so that you can be connected and be going through this discipleship process, not as a Lone Ranger Christian, but as a follower of Jesus in a discipleship community, just like he intended for you to be. My email is weston@gracepoint.ca. You can find more information about our church at gracepoint.ca. Thank you, and God bless.